What's going on, brother?
Not a whole lot. Another
Yeah,
day.
yeah, another day. So
Yeah.
just got done knocking out a little dynamic effort lower. So I'm still a little out of breath, pumped up right now.
Mhm,
It was fun. So I didn't have a ton of time, and I was running around getting different stuff, getting a headset and a few other
mhm.
things, and time got away from me, and I was like, damn, dude, I really need to just get this in, or I'm not going to do it at all today. So I supersetted the box squats and the sumo deads.
Mhm.
Got the heart rate up a little bit, but just tried to move intentionally and then hit some accessories and probably go back out there after this and hit a few more things and call it a day. I just always feel
Cool.
better when I get something in, you know?
How was, did you talk to Joe since, I was up there or down there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in there right now getting warmed up.
Good,
So
good.
yeah, working with Tony a little bit more on being intentional, based off some of the things that you showed her.
Mhm.
So we recently, Shane came to North Carolina, and we got to spend some time together and shoot some content. And we did do a podcast with our wives on there. And for whatever reason, the one they get on ends up breaking. Imagine that. So far, it's been good with with us, but we put the wives on there, and they just break shit.
It happens.
That's funny.
Next time we're down, we'll try again.
Yeah, for sure. I got that mixer, and I think it was too much for me. So this is seems to be working. You can hear me, I can hear you.
Mhm.
So I just got to figure out how to do the in person thing.
Yeah.
That's a little different
Yeah, definitely. And, I don't know, I'm always on this end, I'm never on the tech side for obvious reasons. But, I've never used a mix or anything, but, I feel like the sound that comes from these mics and that work pretty good.
for sure. What you got going on today? You doing some training with some clients or
Yeah, I have a
right
client
now?
coming up after this. I had some earlier. And it's fun, it's fun having all different types of clients, different sports to people who just want to be healthy and in shape. And I think that's the hard part for my gym, I think locally is a lot of people think about it just for athletes. And you know, uh majority of my clients are people who just want to be healthy and in shape. And I think, it's like the same thing people read, or if I talk about, or we talk about like say conjugate system, right? They're thinking about, oh, well, yeah, that's what athletes use. My question to you is like, wouldn't you want to get the best results for the amount of time you're willing to put in? The difference between an athlete and someone who just wants to be healthy is the amount of time they want to put in and what their goals are, right?
Right.
But it's funny that people often think because their goal might be what they can consider maybe inferior to someone else's goal. Like I don't want to be the best in the world at something. That automatically you have to cut to an inferior way to train. You know,
Right.
when really it's like, look, I want optimal results, optimal longevity, and that comes with optimal training. And if your goals aren't to be the best in the world at something, you want to be the best variation of you can be. Um, the training is just laid out in how much time are you willing to spend on that, right? But
Right.
wouldn't you still want to get, the best results out of that, right? So it's funny, as a coach for a long time, trainer for a long time, I can't tell you how many times I've had people come in and say, hey, I worked with a trainer for 3, 4 years to get in shape to be able to train with you. And he just wants to say, well, that's my job.
Yeah.
You might have been farther along in 3, 4 years if you came to me to start off
Right. You
with.
could have you could have saved a lot of money at
Yep.
this point. Now we're gonna start right where you left off, which wasn't that great. That's funny. Now, I was working with somebody earlier, and they were like kind of debating, not debating, but just like inquisitive because
Hmm.
of what other people have told them, people, coaches they've worked with and stuff. And they were like, is all this strength stuff really necessary? And I was like, in the grander scheme of things, not necessarily, but you're saying you want to compete at the highest level of the sport. And there's a lot of deficiencies that we've identified by doing this. And if we're going to attack those deficiencies and we're going to bring you up, people think just because it's the sport of fitness, right? That it's just these CrossFit style movements that people are participating in. But if you just go back to the definition of CrossFit itself, then you start to
Mhm.
see that you may be able to find your gaps where you can plug and play. It's constantly varied functional fitness performed at a high intensity. And then when you define fitness, fitness is increased work capacity across broad time and modal domains. Broad
Mhm.
time, we're going to go long sometimes. We're going to go in that medium duration. Sometimes we're going to do really short
Mhm.
and intense, like one rep max, or, we're going to do a Fran or something like that that's going to send your heart rate through the roof. Modal domains, the part that this athlete really enjoys is the monostructural stuff, all the ings, the rowing, the biking, the running,
Mhm.
cyclic in nature. And then, they're halfway decent at gymnastics. But then when you look at this curve, right, they're significantly lower than the rest of the field in strength. And it's like, that's why you came to me, because you're higher on everything else than everybody, but yet you can't get to that level that you want to go to because you're lacking in this area. So yes, it's 100% necessary.
Mhm.
And I would argue that, like, everybody needs to lift weights, right? You should stress the skeletal system, the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons, because you
Mhm.
don't know what life's going to demand of you. So to your point is like, hey, this person wanted to compete at the next level of their sport, or at the 80-year-old client that I work with, they both need to squat. In the words of Glassman, their needs vary by degree, not kind. Everybody
Mhm.
needs to squat. Everybody needs to load. Everybody needs to be able to independently put their arms over their head and pick and press and pull and do all the things that we do. We're just doing it in a controlled
Mhm.
environment.
Yeah. It's if you look at anything done at the highest level, right? Everything kind of goes by a structure of rules, and it's funny how that goes because I watched there's a documentary Game Changers, and basically they took some of the top athletes to ever live in their sport. All of them said the one thing they want is more variety and less sport specific stuff. Like the kids should be doing more variations or even different sports and different types of training. And you look at CrossFit and, like you said, constantly, varied, high intensity functional fitness, and for them, the high intensity is, there's a clock on. Everybody who says they're not, competitive, the minute that buzzer goes off, they turn competitive, which is kind of funny. I always thought. But it's a race against the clock, right? So that's where they get the intensity from. Constant variation, obviously you're supposed to be ready for anything at any time, so you have to have constant variation. And then when you talk about functional fitness, that's where they try to use a lot of functional movements that would happen in nature, right? But if you look at like what we do, when you layer specific special strengths, and what I mean by that, it's like if we need to increase absolute strength, we will. If we need to increase explosive power, we will. If we need to increase speed, strength, speed, whatever type of special strength you need, we will improve that. And then when you look at high intensity, well, what's the highest form of intensity? A one rep max, right? So we have constantly varied in our programming between our accessories, our main movements,
The most
types of
variance, in fact.
resistance, the most
There probably
variation.
isn't. Yeah, there probably isn't another program out
Hmm.
there on the market that has as much variation as we
I
do.
mean, not even close. I wouldn't even say half as many variations as we have.
Why is that
Um,
important? Like, I don't want to sidetrack you, but I know you
yeah,
have a good spiel
no.
about variation and
So variation, there's a couple things. One, let's look from the lowest point of view, and what I mean is the easiest one for new coaches or people to follow a new program can recognize. Okay, and that is that if you do constant variation, weaknesses can't hide anywhere. Right? If you have enough variation, it will be found. So, for people out there who are just maybe getting started in this type of programming, something like that, it's pretty simple. If you have, say, two training partners, so there's three of you, and you guys deadlift about the same, or squat or bench, whatever it is, and if you guys are on a similar strength, and two of you are much stronger at one movement than the other one, that's probably exactly what you need. Or if you're way stronger than everybody else in that one, it's not an exercise that's going to carry over for you and give you something. Okay, so it allows us to see. Um, it allows us to make corrections. So what I look for is a breakdown in position or a loss of speed somewhere. That lets me know where my weakness is, what muscle group is weak, and then we can prescribe accessory movements for that, right? So that's kind of the lowest level. Identify weakness and make a correction to it, which is awesome because it lowers injury rate and makes your efficiency go through the roof, and it makes you a better athlete. But when you're looking at a higher level, another level up is also the fact that you need 15% or more new movement a year to learn new movement at the fastest rate possible. Now, if you want to talk about functional fitness, do something that makes you pick up new movement faster than anything else. Because, if you look at the CrossFit Games, you never know if there's new apparatus or new movement they're going to bring out that year. If you look at life, you never know, or you look at military, hey, who knows what's going to come your way, right? You have to be ready for kind of anything that can come your way.
Might have to
And
snatch up a Venezuelan president and throw him in the back
there
of the
you go.
helicopter, you never know.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, so that's where we need that variation. But the thing about it for me is, which I always thought interesting is, everybody always wants to do exercise they're good at, right? I mean, that's just a common. You see it. That's 99% of people that are going to gym, and those movements that they do are the movements that they like because they're good at them, right? So for me, what I try to tell people is, the movements you're good at. If you didn't know anything about training, scrap them all. Only do the movements that you're not good at, right? But essentially what you want to do, and what I found when going to West Side is getting in constant variation, more variation in my training, is that you only did the stuff you weren't good at, then eventually you got good at it. And what I would tell you is get as much variation as you can and get good at all of it. When you're
And
good at anything that comes your way, you're going to love every exercise and every workout that you have. Don't limit your output to just the exercise that you are leveraged for currently, because you're going to have a very small window, maybe 5% of what you could have that you're good at. Why not get good at all the other 95% and thoroughly love every workout that comes your way?
yeah, that's I think hard for high performers to understand.
Mhm.
When you're running, the nice thing when you're running
Mhm.
conjugate with like your everyday run of the mill Sally, they're not really great at anything, so
Mhm.
everything is okay. But when you take a high level individual that's never really been picked apart before, and then you start going through this,
Mhm.
psychologically, they have a hard time pushing some of those things unless you're right there with them, at least in my experience. Um, that's where I have to tell them, like, "Hey, I don't need you to get good at accessories, right? These are developing some things. So, like, if you're really
Mhm.
good at it and it's not doing anything for you, I'm just gonna take it out of the rotation and find something that is gonna push the numbers to the next level, because I
Mhm.
don't need you getting good at accessories. I need you getting good at your sport, your main lifts, whatever it is that I'm using those, accessory movements for to bring those up." And, it's funny you talk about variation because, like, I can't imagine that anybody, because I've also heard the critique, like, you guys are just, like, random, too much variation, things
Mhm.
weird things like that, right? Without really understanding what's going on. It's like, if you just had somebody do a back squat, I don't know, every Monday, for a period of time, they would probably get stronger, right?
Mhm.
They a lot of programs run these strength cycles. We don't do that, and I'll have you talk a little bit about why that is, because I know you're not a fan of strength cycles either.
Mhm.
Um, but they'll run these strength cycles and they get really good at squatting because they put lots of practice in it. They didn't necessarily get stronger, they got better. And maybe they got a little bit stronger, sure,
Mhm.
but they definitely got better at squatting because they got their repetitions in. What we use our repetition method for, to get practice at it, but also to
Mhm.
increase speed, and those leverages. But what happens after they get off that? Well, we know they end up losing their
Mhm.
their strength. But also, if you're doing the same lift all the time over and over again, you probably see this more in powerlifting, I would imagine. People just squat,
Mhm.
bench, deadlift. And do the things that they want to do. But if you're not changing up those variations, the saying that you say all the time, and I love to steal it, is repetitive motion injuries aren't just for factory workers. Like, you
Mhm.
have to change those things up a little bit, because one, they're going to adapt to it,
Mhm.
and then they're not going to grow because the adaptation is going to blunt the progress there. But then two, to your point, like, it makes sense when we're talking about gymnastics, right?
Mhm.
If you have a client that comes into your gym, regardless of the sport, and their goal is to do a pull up, and you only put them on ring rows, and that's your only variation of pull up that you can challenge
Mhm.
them with. Well, one, it's a different plane, right?
Mhm.
We're going from a horizontal to a vertical pull. So it's a completely different thing. But will it help increase pulling strength? Yes, for a period of time. But
Mhm.
that wouldn't be my only variation, slow eccentrics, maybe some jumping, maybe some static holds, maybe some reverse band, lots of different options there that we could use. And people understand that, I think, better now.
Mhm.
But when we start talking about variation in weightlifting, if it's something they haven't seen or they're not used to, then it doesn't compute for some reason.
Correct. What works for you now will not always work for you. That is just anything in life. If you look at a business, you do the same thing over and over again. Eventually, someone else will see what you do, try to figure out a way to do it better. They evolve it. Now you're behind the curve. So you have to evolve before someone gets there. And if you look at, like, say, take the military, for example, if they have an infill in an area and they have good success at dropping people off into that area for a mission they want to do or whatever they're looking to do, they don't drop everybody off every single time in the same exact place. Eventually people figure it out and make an adjustment, right? And what you want to do is be ahead of there. You don't want to ever show up when someone's made an adjustment waiting for you, right? And you don't want to do that in business. You don't want to do that in sport. So the thing is, all sports change, rules change. You see tactics start to change, technology changes. Since the only constant in life is change, you might as well get good at it, right? And so what I look at is, one, if you're not good at change, you're going to fall behind no matter what, guaranteed, period. So you're not in the game. Even if you're winning right now, you're not in the game in my mind, because you're winning short term. I don't show up for short term success. I show up for long term success, and I want repeatability out of my success and my result. So therefore, I have to be ahead of the curve, ahead of everybody else. And something I used to always do at powerlifting meets is when, so one of my athletes would go against someone else who's one of the top in the world, and they would beat them. I've had this multiple times. Like, I've heard them say, I don't understand how that happened. I don't understand how they're making gains that quick at this level. I've literally walked up to the people and explained and laid out everything that we did and told them what I saw in them that they needed to change and make adjustments in their training. And one time it was one of my athletes breaking another person's world record who was a world champion, and they dropped down to the weight class and took their numbers out head to head with them. It was either nationals or worlds. And so the athlete was sitting in front of me afterwards talking to a friend, like, I don't understand this and blah, blah. I'm like, hey, excuse me. I heard what you're saying. Do you mind, can I tell you how, and what I saw in you where you need to make
What the
improvement.
fuck do you know, guy?
Yeah. Right. What's funny is the person was like, okay. So I explained it to them. I mean, them in detail,
Yeah.
and afterwards they're giving me a weird look, and I'm like, hey, I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you exactly. And they go, no. What you said makes a lot of sense. And the look must be like, I'm wondering why you're telling me. And I said, plain and simple. I said, you were number one in the world. You've won multiple world titles. Out of respect to you, I don't want to beat you because we know something you don't know. I want to pay the respect since you've been in the game so long. I'm sure you've passed it along to other people and taught other people. So I want to help you out. I said, at the same time, that does two things for me. That makes my athlete, when they know that I'm telling you and I told you what happened, they have to be on their toes and they can't relax now. The second thing, as a coach, for me, it makes me have to keep evolving and come up with something new or evolve something I was doing or get better at it to stay ahead of you. I said, so really, I said, it's something that benefits all of us, and that's why I do it. I want to give back to the sport. I don't need to, hold everything to me. I learned that from Lou. Lou always gave everything away, and he did that to keep himself on his toes. And I saw, hey, well, who was the best coach out, producing more than ever? I'm listening to him, and I'm doing the same thing. And, it's benefited, me. It's benefited my athletes. It's benefited this style of training. It helps things evolve, right? So, no matter what, you don't want to fall victim to law of accommodation. If you fall victim to that, you start to become more efficient at movement. You don't actually get better at movement. Psychologically, you've had the weight on your shoulders more, so you get more comfortable with it. You get a groove, you get a little more natural in the movement. That doesn't evolve you. Okay. Efficiency doesn't evolve you in a sense. So, what we're going to do is we push the capacities and the special strengths, and we build the qualities that we need. My thing about it, though, which is amazing to me, is people don't want to do it, but that's an ego thing. That's because you want to come off strong in the gym and people think you're strong or think you're fast or think you have good endurance or whatever the movement is. That's an ego.
There's always somebody better,
Yep.
bigger,
And ego
faster,
kills you,
stronger.
right?
Yeah.
If you take the aspect of I can be beaten if I don't dot my I's and cross my T's, that's more what we want to look at. We want to constantly evolve. And the thing I tell you is, like, my wife and I talk about this all the time. It's like, man, you can use Conjugate for life. Like, it doesn't need to be like, not talking about training, but just how you live your life. Right. And it's funny because the thought process is that like I said, the only thing guaranteed in life is change. And what is the one thing that majority of people hate? People hate
Change.
change.
They can't
Exactly.
stand it.
But if you're great at it, like everybody loves what they're good at. Just like we say, like people you choose a limited amount of exercises for what their leverage good for because they like being good at stuff. Why wouldn't you want to be good at change? Since it's guaranteed to happen in life, why wouldn't you want to be good at it? And what I found that when I was training the system, it changed the way I looked at life. I knew change was coming, and I just try to position myself to be ahead of it, not behind it. And the thought process from this type of training, seeing the success that it gives to athletes, made me change the way I looked at life. Right.
And imagine like you're a CrossFit coach, right? And
Hmm.
you got your CrossFit level 1, the foundation, the basic course that you need
Hmm.
to coach at a CrossFit gym.
Hmm.
Maybe you've gone to a gymnastics course or something like that, and a Bergener strength or something.
Hmm.
You got a little bit under your tool set. When you come to the conjugate powerlifting course, you're going to have more tools to add to your kit that is only going to make you a better coach. And we're not talking about theory, we're talking
Hmm.
about proven methods that actually work, and teaching people how to identify those things and ways to correct and fix it.
Hmm.
Is going to be infinitely valuable, and it's only going to bring more credibility to the coach.
Hmm.
And they can come in person, or they can take that online one and use a fake alias,
Hmm.
so no one has to know that they ever learned from Shane. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, like, there's so many methods out there, along with all the podcasts that you've done, along with all the
Hmm.
articles and things that you've written, and you give away the information so freely for
Hmm.
anybody who wants it, and it's just funny how many people are hesitant or resistant when you're
Hmm.
offering something for free.
Hmm.
If you put, like, a price tag on it that was, like, unrealistic,
Hmm.
people would probably listen to you more, tentatively, you know what I mean? But it's like, "Hey, I'm trying to help
Yep.
because I don't really care at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd like my athlete to win, but I want
Hmm.
the best athlete to win, and the only
Hmm.
way that we're gonna, maximize that is if everybody is doing a system that maximizes leverages, that improves them. And my dream situation would be to have, like, 2 fighters in the UFC that I'm working with separately,
Hmm.
and they meet up for, like, a
Hmm.
world championship, and then we just get to see, like, because I know they're both
Hmm.
leveraged perfectly for their
Hmm.
sport, and then they go out there and we truly get to see who the best fighter is. It's like,
Hmm.
George St. Pierre, like, a phenomenal fighter. I've heard you reference him, several times. I used to love
Hmm.
watching him fight.
Hmm.
Um, he just didn't have the knockout power, and it's like, man,
Hmm.
if you coulda just got your hands on him in his prime, we don't know how good he truly could have been. And towards the end, you could just see it all over his face. He was falling out of love with the thing, and
Yeah.
it,
It yeah, it's sad, right? Because I mean, in all honesty, the minute I saw what was happening to him, I knew he was training at the wrong speeds, and so I started searching for training. I watched some videos on YouTube, and it was just training the wrong speeds is all it was. The guy has an insane work ethic. He was good at a lot of things, and his trainer got him good at a lot of things. They were just missing one hole in the game that, unfortunately, see, because for me, like I know I could give him like really like good one hit knockout power, some devastating power. I know for a fact, and
this has
that
also been proven.
yeah. Yeah, right. And not to change any, like, and the thing is, like, the rest of it wouldn't change. His conditioning wouldn't have changed, right?
Mm-mm.
Actually would have got a little bit better, but that's a whole,
Well,
there's a whole
that
nother
goes back to
reasons behind that.
optimizing leverages, right? When you're not
Well,
struggling in your conditioning,
he would have
and
stored kinetic energy at a higher rate of speed, so he would
there you
have
go,
more power on knockouts, and he could throw the same he could use a little less energy and throw just as hard, or use the same energy and throw harder.
and go
So,
significantly longer.
it would help him with knockout power, help with, like, perceived motor. I say that because it wasn't gonna get through, like, increasing VO2 max or anything like that, or increasing his, conditioning. It would be just increasing the kinetic energy storage, and velocity and how fast you could produce maximal force. So,
Can I back you up real quick? So you're talking a
yeah.
lot about kinetic energy, and for those don't know, what are you talking about, and how does it relate to that knockout power that you're talking about?
Okay, so from tests that we've done and studies that we've done, you look at like a lot of like Division One athletes, football players, basketball players, you should store kinetic energy for about 2.4 to 2.6 seconds, and you're
What does that do for an athlete, though?
so think of it this way. Um, All right. So kinetic energy, think about if you take a basketball and if I just hold it like at face height and I let it go, it only bounces so high.
Mhm.
If I throw it down, it has a greater, it doesn't have any muscles to jump. The ball hits the ground harder. It has more deformation into the ball and faster reversal speed. Okay. So the rubber, it works like elastic properties. Your tendons in your body are made of material that has a similar type of elasticity to it. Okay. So when we are doing speed work and using accommodating resistance bands pulling from the top to bottom, they have an over speed eccentric and they store more energy into those tendons. So you have faster reversal speed when you come up. After we've trained like that for extended periods of time, what happens is we build tendon thickness. Our tendons get stronger and they can hold more energy for longer periods of time. So we were having athletes hold kinetic energy storage for 9.8 seconds. So you're like talking almost 4 times the amount of a Division One athlete from a good school, great athlete, and that was just taking people that we trained for a long time. That a lot of them, most of them, never went to college to play sports. They weren't at that level.
So if I'm a high school
Um,
football coach and I'm looking at
mhm,
implementing something like this, the reality is, hey, these kids are going to have to get in a 3-point stance,
mhm,
offense, defense, and when that ball moves, they have to fire off.
mhm,
And whoever can hold that position the longest and store that energy and be able to transfer
correct.
that energy is going to win that battle.
Correct. So, like if George St. Pierre threw a punch
Because
and his arm
they're
came
usually
back,
sitting like this, right? They're
yep.
in this position.
So if he throws a punch and when that arm comes back, he has some stored kinetic energy in that arm. He has around 2.5 seconds to throw that with that extra energy. Now it is a fight. Someone else is trying to hurt you as well. So you're not going to throw it just to throw it because like, oh man, I only have 2 more seconds left to throw it. You're not going to do that. You're going to throw whenever you would normally throw. And if that happens to be at 3.5 seconds, you don't have energy on it. It is. If it's 1.5 seconds later, cool, you got a little extra energy on it. But if you think if someone has 2.5 seconds versus almost 10 seconds, that is a lot more usable energy. It is going to be brought into play a lot more frequently. Okay. So, that is, and sometimes if you look at like when he fought Josh Koscheck and like if you look at the amount of jabs he threw, oh, he would have had extra power. I mean, he ended the fight on with the jabs, right? Which was awesome. That's a great thing to see. It would have been more devastating and ended quicker, by even the same movement. It didn't need to change. It just would have more power on each punch. Um, so the kinetic energy storage is huge. The thickness of your tendons, the strength, for durability is massive. When you're
Do you
doing the
do you think
speed
that's
work or
the
the
leg
comp,
up that Tyson Mike not to cut you off there, but do you think
yeah,
that's the leg up that Mike Tyson had? Because he was a big boy back in the day, and, his
mhm,
knockout power was impressive, but he was right here the whole time, you know? Do you think it had anything to do with, like, his ability, genetically
mhm.
speaking, or, maybe just the thickness of his ligaments and tendons and things of that nature, the way he trained, or
Some people are more genetically gifted for thicker tendons and kinetic energy storage for sure,
Okay.
and no doubt that could have played part of it. Part of it though is he was really good at speed strength, and
Mm,
where Joe St. Pierre was better at faster speeds, but those
okay.
faster speeds, it was like swinging a wiffle ball bat at 100 miles an hour to make it simple, where Tyson swung a sledgehammer at 100 miles an hour. So
Okay.
there's a difference, So yes, he could flick punches out quick, but they didn't have a lot on him, and that was because the types of strengths he was training were the wrong strengths. When you look at, he was doing a lot of I saw Olympic lifting and gymnastics, and they're both very impressive sports, but your time under tension is too little. Okay. What
Mhm.
happens when you're doing Olympic lift? You yank the bar for
You
after a
run into
split second, it
weightlessness.
becomes weightless.
Mhm.
You cannot produce maximal force against minimal weight. Once you take the weight off the bar and the bar starts floating in an Olympic lift, you're not producing force, enough
Unless
force
you're
to
doing
get something
cleans with
done.
Shane, and then he
Yeah,
puts
right.
bands on them, and you learn how
Exactly.
to pull the entire
Yeah.
time.
So that's the thing about accommodating resistance, right? Is it forces you to produce more force through range of motions that you normally would back off. So think of terms like this. Anybody who's done a really heavy squat, the bottom half is the hardest. The second half is easier. The top 1/3 is like where you get to rest before you start your next rep. So if you're doing an 8 rep max, it's almost like that top 1/3. You're like, oh, thanks, because like, you get a little bit of a break, right?
Cool.
Well, when you use chains and accommodating resistance, the percentage that we use those percentages so that it will reflect in as your leverage improves, the accommodating resistance comes on equally, so you're producing the same amount of force all the way through range of motion, right? And this will train you to have more force production for longer periods of time, meaning you're going to throw faster, punch harder and faster because of that. So we can change the firing pattern of your tissue to fire for a longer period of time, get you to store greater amounts of kinetic energy, so you have faster reversal speed, faster hand speed, more power on your punches. And these are all things that we can do with like accommodating resistance. And to give you one thing, like I had a I hate to say this, but it was a friend of mine that trained at my gym that I trained that I don't ever want to see anybody get hurt. And anybody who's been around my gym knows it's like extreme rarity for anybody to get hurt. But when you're breaking world records and you're going after stuff, things can happen.
Pushing to the
Yeah,
extremes.
pushing the limit. So I had a guy that was around 1,100-pound squatter and probably a little over. And he was getting ready for a meet, and he was pretty far out. I think he was right around 9 weeks out. So we were going to work up to like 1,050, easy, done, out. He was very violently explosive. The 1,050 blew up like it was like pretty much, it looked like an empty bar. I mean, he just flew up, and he just made a quick noise like he was in pain, right? When he like locked it out, and he fell. Um, Really weird accident because usually things happen in the bottom, usually not right at the top, right before someone locks it out. But either way, so I went to check and I went to grab his quad because I thought the way he went down and stuff, maybe his quad came off. And he's like, I think my quad's off. Well, he had an indentation the first like 2 inches above his knee, but his quad was still there. I'm like, this is the weirdest thing because I'm like, there is something definitely raveled up, but every quad I've ever seen rip off goes, all the way up. So I've never ever seen one at my gym or West Side, but at powerlifting meets, I've seen plenty of them,
It's just funny because you just said it so like nonchalant. You're like,
I've
yeah,
seen
every
enough
time
of
I've
them.
seen a quad get ripped off.
Well,
It's a
that's
normal
like,
Tuesday at a powerlifting meet in
right.
middle of nowhere, Ohio.
But,
People
that's
ripping
where your
quads off.
experience comes in, because you see
Yeah.
enough of it and then you help people out when they're in a bad situation like that and you start to learn. And so I said, there's something different about this one, but we ended up getting him in his truck, got him to the hospital. The surgeon looks at it, it's a sports surgeon. He's like, I'll be right back. Starts calling around, comes back. He's like, man, I've searched all because because I haven't found anybody who's ever seen this before. And he's like, my patella tendon rip off? He goes, no, actually it didn't. He's like, well, my quad feels like it's raveled up. He goes, a little bit. He goes, yeah, it is. And so, the guy's kind of like, oh, well, okay, how else does this work? He goes, I've never seen this before. He goes, you have the thickest tendons I've ever seen in my life. He goes, your patella tendon is like, it's like the size of my thumb. He's like, I've never seen anything like this before. He goes, that your patella tendon is so strong. He goes, your patella tendon didn't come off. He goes, it ripped your shin bone out. He's like, it's still completely attached to the bone.
That's
you
awesome.
know? And it was funny because a long time ago, Lou, he used to train at Westside Barbell when Louis was still alive. And Louis had said this to him. And Louis had said this to me. It said, like, if you train them, your tendons correctly, they can become stronger than bone. And it was funny because he's like, well, old man was right again.
Yeah, I had a rugby player that I was training for a while, undersized rugby player, but he was
Mhm,
violently explosive after working with him for about
mhm,
6 months. So much so that he was definitely punching above his weight. We'll say that.
mhm,
Um, but he was just leveling everyone out there.
mhm,
Not that that's necessarily the sport, but it's the part that we
mhm,
all enjoy about rugby, right? Watch people get
mhm,
hit. So he put on a show. And he got hit one good time, and he blew out his, ACL and
mhm,
PCL because they took him right at the knee, and, somebody that was almost twice the size of him, literally. And, he was still because, he was also in the military, um, he was walking around like that for a couple months until the surgery could happen,
cool.
and, he was still squatting, and I remember he was still doing I mean, not that we ever would recommend this, but the ligaments, the
Mhm,
tendons, the musculature all around it, he was still squatting, pretty close to no, he was over 500 for box
mhm,
squat with all that going on. When he finally had his, surgery, one of them, I think it was the PCL scarred up and kinda healed itself. His ACL, I think he had to get replaced, or whatever they did for it. But same thing, the doctor said, "I've never seen ligaments and tendons this thick, like, what are
mhm.
you doing?"
Yeah.
So it
So,
it does transfer, to your guy, it was a big guy,
Oh,
right? Big
yeah.
guy, very strong guy,
Yeah.
naturally
Over
big.
300 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah, we could say that some of that might have been,
Mhm.
genetics or whatever, but for this
Mhm.
kid, it 100% wasn't. So,
Mhm.
you see it on both sides of the extreme of powerlifting and the extreme of
Mhm.
sport where people are playing professional rugby,
Mhm.
and he was completely okay. So,
Yeah. I mean, we have to ride a fine line. Like, I've had athletes who, you're pushing the bench, it's going up so quick that they get small stress fractures in their forearms, and you have to, as long as they have good technique, you can keep them going. If they have bad technique, you gotta exit because they're gonna break their arms. But we're pushing limits, and I've only had two bad injuries in my gym like that, and the other one was an athlete that I didn't know had prior issues with drugs, and so they had bone density issues, and they were coming down in a bench press in perfect position, and it just shattered their arm. So it broke it back in the bicep at the front, at the front and back, and then through the middle in half. And so I mean, literally shattered their arm. But they had bone density issues. So, it wasn't our fault either. Technique was dead on. They had been training for years before they flew out to meet me. So it just something that was going to happen anyway. But we push limits. And if you can keep people who are on the edge safe, you can keep anybody safe.
right.
But, having accommodating resistance to optimize force production throughout range of motion, storing more kinetic energy, so you can either be one, you're going to be more efficient. Two, it's going to help with reversal speed, which is king in sports. Three, you're going to punch or throw faster. Well, because of that. And then if you are more efficient in storing kinetic energy, I can tell you one thing: you're also less likely to get hurt because your tendons are stronger, more durable, and can handle more.
So speaking of reversal speed, let's
Mm.
go circle back on accommodating resistance real quick. This is a
Mm-hmm.
question that I get a lot. Um, we'll take today's dynamic effort work.
Mm-hmm.
It's using a straight bar, which if you've rolled with Shane for a while, that comes out every now and again. But it's not. You're not very
Mm.
you're very rarely going to see it. Every bar, and he can tell you even better, has its own purpose. But a lot of that extends the life of the lifter. But because sport is played with a straight bar, we use
Mm.
straight bar, and it's also a different adaptation as well.
Mm.
So the lift today was 50% straight bar,
Mm.
25% against 25% band tension box squat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what for anyone listening who's starting this, because I get this question, what does that 25% mean? What does the 50% mean? For you and me, it's intuitive, but when you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at that, it looks like a whole math equation. And if you weren't good at math, you like start sweating and freaking out.
Yeah, so the 50%, right? That's our bar weight. And our bar weight is going to be dependent on the type of variation we're doing. So if we're doing a straight bar box squat and say 25% band tension is what we're going to use or whatever, what we're going to do is we're going to get a straight weight box squat max with a straight bar, and then we're going to take 50% of that weight. If we were going to do a safety squat bar,
So let's say hypothetically,
mm-hmm,
you have a client, they do a 400-pound
mm-hmm,
back squat with a straight or a box squat with a straight bar.
mm-hmm,
So their 50% is then going to be 200.
correct.
Okay.
And yep, yeah, it's gonna be 200. Now, if they were gonna say the same athlete, their safety
Plus the
squat bar,
25%.
yeah, and what's that? 125
Yeah,
or
well, yeah. Can you talk about how we get that 25% with bands? I think that's the most confusing part. So I
okay.
think everybody understands the 50% bar weight,
Mhm.
but what is that 20? How do I measure bands?
So when you hook a bands up to the ground, like,
Mhm.
around a rig, rack, whatever we're using, and then we're gonna pull the band up to our shoulder height where we'd be at the top and to stand up in a squat. We're gonna do one of two things. We're either gonna take like a luggage, we can take a luggage scale and we can hook it underneath the band, pull it up to shoulder height, and that will give us the weight of one band, and then we'll just double it because we're gonna have one band on each side of the bar. Or what we're going to do is take a scale, slide it underneath the rack, stand up with the band tension, the bar, and then what we'll do is we'll subtract the bar weight and our body weight from that. So either one works, and that gives us our 25% of what our max is. So roughly at the top on week one, your 50% bar weight, 25% band, which should put you at 75% of your max weight at the top. Okay. Now, if you use different bars, it is a max dependent on that bar. So take 50% of your
That
safety
part.
squat bar max, 50% of your bow bar max, 50% of your cambered bar max. Do not use your straight weight max for the other ones. It'll be too heavy of a weight. Why is that important? The prescription that we utilize for bar weight and for band tension is utilized to create the speed we want. We're looking at speed strength, so that's 0.8 meters to 1 meter per second. This is going to help you in the realm of powerlifting, Olympic lifting, and sports like CrossFit. Most sports are played at speed strength. There are sports that are not. Olympic lifting is one of them, but it does help with Olympic lifting. But if you look at sports that like Olympic lifting have areas that go beyond 0.8 meters, 1 meter per second. If you look at running a marathon, obviously it's substantially slower than that. But if you look at boxing, if you look at wrestling, if you look at MMA, if you look at basketball, football, like all these sports are speed strength sports. So the speed that we're using will directly translate into optimizing you for that. So that
I'm gonna
speed is the
back you up
most.
just a little bit if you can, because you
What's that?
said
I turned
some
mic up, you said?
we oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Okay.
sorry,
I
what'd you
just wanna
say?
back you up just a hair.
Okay.
When you were talking about the point 0.8 to 1 meters per second,
Mhm,
again, we throw these things around because,
mhm,
you've been doing it for a long time. I've been doing it not quite as long,
mm,
but you've mastered this, and this is like a second language maybe for some people.
mhm,
How do we know if it's point 0.8 meters to 1 meter per second? And if we don't have a device, what's a way we can
mhm,
measure that? And the third question in relation to that is if you
mhm.
have a strong lifter and they're not able to do 50% plus the 25% accommodating resistance at that speed, what should you do?
Okay, so zero point 0.8 meters to 1 meter per second is in a squat. I would say it's like roughly 1 second down, 1 second up. Okay, so it's quick. And that's roughly where you're going to be at. I do recommend, if you can, to get a device for that. I've heard there's some apps that you can use on your phone that give you the, your meters per second. There's Tendo units. There's a lot of collars and stuff that can measure speed. I know Rogue sells some stuff. And what brand is that?
Rep one.
Okay, so like yep, Rep ones. I've heard of a lot of people using those and liking those. And then when that attaches to the bar, it gives you your bar speed. Bar speed is extremely important. Okay, so with bar speed, the reason why it's important is because we measure our volume that way. Power is measured in time, not in weight.
Mm,
So when we're looking at the component of time is important in our power output. When we're looking at speed, how do you know what volume you're training if you don't know what your speed you're training at? How do you know what sport you're training for if you don't know what speed you're training at? Do Formula One cars go around tracks and they don't put a timer on it? Of course, they put a timer. They're trying to get a hundredths of a second per lap faster than the person next to them, so they can win. They're trying to get every ounce of performance. So yes, they do measure it. I do recommend you invest a little bit in yourself. That's the most important thing you can invest in, and get an apparatus, get something that you can utilize that measures bar speed accurately. Until then, I would look at 1 second down, 1 second up in a squat would roughly get you there, but it will not be as good as if you actually have a unit on there measuring, because what I've noticed is some people are capable of 1 meter per second with a weight on their back, but they're roughly hitting about zero point 0.8 all the time. And that is important. We don't want to move the weight at the same speed, because otherwise we can fall victim to a law of accommodation and the fact of that we can create a speed barrier, and we can end up getting really good at that speed and not improving at any other speed. So we want that variation, because zero point 0.8 meter to 1 meter per second, that's 20% variation in that realm. So we do want to optimize and utilize that. Now, once in a while, like Justin said, like what happens if you get a guy who's really strong, but he's slow? The speed is more important than the weight on the bar. So we want to lower the bar weight so we get the speed that we want, because otherwise we're not training the type of speed and it changes our volume. You do
mm,
not want to change volume. We've optimized the amount of volume that we need, and that volume is optimized by percentages of your max. So therefore, we do not make a change in our speed work until we've actually beat a PR in that movement. So I'll use this as an example. We have a safety squat bar that you can squat 15% less with that bar than a straight bar. So if I have someone who hits a safety squat bar max and it matches their straight bar max. And they're like, hey, next week I'm doing a straight bar speed wave. So should I change it and up it since, like 15%, since I know that I'm 15% weaker on the safety squat bar? No. I'm like, yeah, I know I'm stronger. Yep, I know you're stronger too. But we don't do anything based off hypothetical until we actually have our data that tells us for sure you're better at. We don't do it. Part of why we don't do it though is because some people always think they're getting, stronger, and they always want an excuse to put more weight on the bar, and they'll talk themselves right into not training at the correct speed and not getting carryover into the sport. So I don't want that. Um, you know, so we do want to lower the weight. We want the speed that's correct. So we have the correct volume, the correct velocity, so it transfers over to sport. Okay. So speed is more important than the weight on the bar. All right. So always lower the bar weight.
So if somebody doesn't
Mhm.
lower the bar weight and they're training at loads that aren't optimized for their current
Mhm.
leverages, could that in turn be an issue why people aren't recovering from the program,
Mhm.
and maybe getting some issues later on down the line? I know it's probably not a problem
Uh,
you've ever dealt with
mhm.
because you're there a lot of
Mhm.
times, but with, like, people remotely who are training who think, I gotta stick to these
Mhm.
numbers," and they're not doing it correctly, what
Yeah.
could happen to joints, ligaments, things like that if
So I've seen it a lot actually, because a lot of times
Oh,
people
okay.
would show up to a powerlifting meet and they're competing and they end up talking to me at a meet. Um, and I can see that they're not doing everything correctly. And so a lot of times, I'll invite them, hey, if you want to come out to the gym, learn. And eventually they'll come out and we get to conversations, and I'll let them, like, oh, I'm on speed squats today. Cool. All right. Well, why
Perfect.
don't you warm up, load up, get ready. Let me watch. And I'll see that the bar speed's too slow. Well, I would think that you're going to try to do everything you can to optimize what you're doing so that you look good in front of somebody that you're trying to learn from. You don't want to look like you showed up without trying to learn something, trying to pay attention and to what you're supposed to be doing. So if they are moving the bar too slow in front of me, they're always moving the bar too slow, and probably pretty good chance we're going even heavier at home and going even slower at home. And then the next thing you ask them is, okay, so how we wave these? Do you ever deload? Oh yeah, I found about every 9 weeks, 8 weeks or so I have to deload. Okay. Well, I ask that because I already know that you're deloading, and I can tell you that we don't deload. So we deload before a competition because you're never the athlete your training has meant you to be until you're fully recovered from the training that you did to get ready for your event. But during training, we are optimal in our recovery for the next week's worth of training because the way we wave our intensities and volume through our speed work. We do this so that we never have to deload, because if we have to deload, then that is taking progress away from us. So let's say this individual, every 8 weeks, they have to deload, right? And let's say 5 times a year. So 5 times a year they have to deload. And let's say their deload lasts 2 weeks. That's 10 weeks of them not progressing that my athletes are. So over a 10-year time period, that's 100 weeks. That's almost 2 years of not progressing as fast as my athletes are. And that's not including that you're already going to be behind the curve because you're not training at the correct speed anyway, and the speed's not going to carry over. That's just talking about not progressing due to you not recovering quick enough to where you have to back your volume down and change what you're doing. That's not going to progress you forward during that time. You could do the same exact programming as my athletes, and they're going to be a couple years advanced from you. In all honesty, probably 2.5 years advanced, maybe 3 years, because you're not training at the correct speed anyway. So in a 10-year time period, we'll pull a 3-year gap. That's pretty simple, and that's just how it goes. So everything can be turned into mathematics. So you can figure out where we're losing and what percentage we're going to lose on. It's not a problem whatsoever. But the thing about this is this program is designed for you to not have to deload. So let's say you feel like you have to deload. That means a couple things. One, look at the speed of which you're moving the bar.
Uh-huh.
Okay. If the bar is too heavy and the bar speed's too slow, that's why, or at least one of the reasons.
I
First, clear
fully
that up.
understand this, and I really hope
Hmm.
people who are doing this listen to this
Hmm.
part, because just off the gyms I've gone to with you
Mhm,
and, when we've done the courses and talking with people and watching it done,
mhm,
I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make,
mhm,
besides randomly guessing on their, accommodating resistance.
mhm. Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's so look, you're not trained at the correct speed, so you're not getting the benefit of that,
But you're
of
not
the
even
speed
doing
work.
conjugate at that point, right? Like,
No, and
you're training with bands and chains to put on a show.
yep. And then you're not recovering correctly. So let's say so that's what we're gonna look at first. If you feel like you have to deload, we look at the speed of the bar. If the speed was correct, then we're gonna look at, food, sleep, stress, right? If the bar speed the problem, I'm still gonna look at, am I optimizing my sleep? Am I stressed more than normal? Am I optimizing my nutrients intake? I'm still gonna look at those things. But that bar speed has to get changed because no matter what, if that doesn't get changed, you're always going to have to deload at some point. And you're doing this correctly if you don't have to deload and you're constantly hitting PRs, and that's the goal and that's what you want to do. You know,
Hell yeah. Let's wrap it
you,
up there, man. Oh, you got
oh,
something else?
no, I just, yeah, one thing we were talking
Yeah,
earlier
yeah, yeah.
about variation, right?
Okay.
And people, they hate variation. They're scared of it. They hate change, all that stuff. We're in an interesting place. United States produces a lot of good athletes. The problem that we have, though, is we think that once you build an athlete, they can only do one sport.
Mm.
Blows my mind. Athletes are more. To me, it's more mental than physical. If you get an athlete who has both, that's that once every 100-year athlete anyway, and nobody's going to beat them anyway. But this system, the conjugate sequence system, was being done in the early 70s, in two different places. It was being done in Russia, and it was also being done at the original Culver City West Side Barbell in Culver City, California. And Russia gets credit for it because they named it first. And I'm not saying they shouldn't get credit for it. They were doing experiments on it, and it was probably instead of a gym that was building Olympic gold medalists, world champions in track and field, and in
It was probably a
powerlifting and
laboratory.
Olympic lifting. Yeah, that was more like, yeah, that was like their garage laboratory,
All
right?
these,
That was
like,
Culver
pads
City.
hooked up to him, like, you're looking at, like, Rocky and
Yeah,
Drago or something.
yeah, right. And yeah, and then
I
you
think
have
you got
Russia
that poster in
who
your don't you have that poster in your gym? The Rocky
what's
poster
that
in
one?
the it's in the bathroom.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
there's one. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, I think it's
yeah.
in the
Who came
bathroom.
out on top? So, but
Oh,
that's
there
one
you
of
go.
those things that, when you look at Russia, who been a powerhouse for a long time in Olympic lifting, and that's where the conjugate sequence system was developed, was with their Olympic lifters, which is raw, by the way, not wearing equipment. When you look at those athletes, China did not produce they did not produce Olympic gold medals in Olympic lifting until after they sent two of the top lifters for 9 months to Russia, who afterwards both got Olympic gold and became the Chinese national team coaches. And so then if you look at Russia and China have the two most amount of variations in exercise for Olympic lifting and training, and they're two best countries in the world at it. But when you look at Russia and
Imagine
China,
that.
there's also another thing that they do that's really that's good and interesting, and we should pay attention to this because if you train correctly, utilizing like the conjugate system, you can do this. Um, so there's a girl for China at one point that she was a multiple Olympic gold medalist in diving, like platform diving, right?
Right?
And at the time, China had number like 1 through 4 in the world. So they felt like they were a little weak and on their soccer team. So they took her off to play soccer, even though she was the number one diver. They're like, the other three aren't going to get beat anyway. So we're going to put them over here. And you're built more for this, you're size wise and everything, are built more for the position we want in soccer. So she showed up to the next
That's
Olympics and
crazy.
medaled in the next Olympics in soccer, two different sports.
Why
That is
not?
not uncommon in Russia. That is
Right.
not uncommon in China, because once you have someone who has a
It is
mental
uncommon in the US.
capacity, it is uncommon in the US. But over there, what they know is you have certain attributes that's been built into you and you have the mindset already. If you have the mindset and you have the physical attributes and you know how to train and they've shown that you train properly, you listen to what needs to be done, very easy to teach you a new sport. You're an athlete. You're built perfect for it already. You already have the output for it. It's world class. You just need to gain the skill set. And you're talking about a world class athlete. They can gain the skill set quick. Over here, we don't think people can do that. Do you think that every pro athlete always magically found their exact sport. I mean, don't get me wrong. I always say, like, I'm 5'7". I wasn't going to play in the NBA, right? Like, I get that. I know that. But, if I was number one in the world in Olympic lifting, I could have been number one in the world in my weight class in powerlifting potentially, right? It also means I could have played soccer or been a kickboxer or a boxer. Like, there's multiple sports that my body that I could be competitive in, and those attributes can transfer over. And once you have the GPP, the work capacity, and you have the physical output, you can accelerate at a certain rate of speed. You have a certain amount of force production, all that stuff. You can do more in one sport. The
Mm.
problem why we don't do it in the US is because too many of our professional athletes have imbalances because they don't choose the correct special strengths, and they don't choose necessarily, they don't balance out correctly with the correct amount of special exercise to create true balance in their build structure. So
Well, it's
that's why
obvious
they're
too when they
more
show
towards
up at
sport.
the, in international weightlifting competitions and they give you
Mm-hmm.
that like behind the scenes look and you
Mm-hmm.
see your American weightlifters and your German weightlifters and then you see the
Mm-hmm.
Chinese and they all look like fucking bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Like they were literally coming out of a lab. And,
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing too that has been really nice. I think a couple visits ago when you were down here, you walked in, looked around and you go, nice. And I was like, what? You're like, I could tell every single person here is training the conjugate system. Um, because they're all jacked. Like
Mm-hmm.
they looked like
Mm-hmm.
they were doing it. You could see imbalances that you could spot a mile away on a CrossFitter they didn't have, and
Mm-hmm.
these are moms and grandmas,
Mm-hmm.
and they looked freaking awesome. I've even had people come in during those times, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, "Is this a competitors class?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "No, these are moms and grandmas,
Mm-hmm.
and they're back slapping, and they're pulling some pretty serious weight. Babies in the stroller over there
Mm-hmm.
crying because mom just screamed,
Mm-hmm.
she had PR and rang a bell or something. It's
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, you can tell when somebody's doing it and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing it correctly because
Mm-hmm.
something happens to the way even the big guys, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard you talk about, like, the tricep, for, like, some of your bigger guys, how
Mm-hmm.
there's not that indention right there, but it goes
Mm-hmm.
all the way down, and,
Mm-hmm.
for mine, the things that I see is, like, all this is filling out from Inconius's, JM's, Tate's
Mm-hmm.
on the backside right there. I can feel things that I've never felt before in my triceps that only help me press even more, and I still got just based off of the athletes that you work with, I still
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of potential to bring that
Mm-hmm.
bench up. So it's
100%.
it's pretty exciting.
Definitely.
But I really like that, and I've stolen that. I mean, I've stolen more things than I've probably given you at this point.
It's
Um,
all right. We all do it. Stole a lot from
um,
Louis.
Yeah, for sure. But I look at athletes now, and when they come to me and they say they want to do X, Y, and Z, I can start to look at the
Mm-hmm.
way their body's built, and then I compare that to people in their field. And like I have a female who is very good at cross. I will say she will be a threat this year. And one of the biggest changes I made is she was built like an hourglass.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so she had that, like that slim
Mm-hmm.
figure, that, used to be really popular early 2000s, 90s, and I had to really start to thicken out her midline because if you look at
Mm-hmm.
CrossFit girls who are performing well, they have a nice thick midline.
Mm-hmm.
You can see, the little V cut, you can see the
Yep.
abs popping, you can see some lower spinal erectors, things are developed, the ones that are doing it correctly, and so that was the first thing I was like, everything else, quads, hamstrings,
Mm-hmm.
shoulders look pretty much the same, but then we get to the midline and it's like this, and I'm like, dude, I gotta thicken that up,
Yeah.
so that you can brace and your back isn't lighting up.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, guess what? It's not a surprise to you, I'm sure, but her chief complaint for Metcons was what? Her low back was blowing up all the
Yeah.
time.
Right.
So we thickened up the midline. It wasn't like an overnight thing either.
Mm-hmm.
A
No, it
lot of
takes
the
time to do that.
yeah, it takes time, and it's still going to take some time. I think come come semifinals, the games, we're gonna be right where we need to be as far as
Mhm.
that goes, and I'm really excited to see what happens this year with that.
When you look at that small waistline, I think, look, when I see a thick waistline that's shredded and thick, I
Mhm.
think athlete.
Right.
You look at any sport, you do any rotational movements, you're gonna have a thick, trunk. If you're carrying weight, load, like they do in CrossFit, you're gonna get a thick trunk. If you look at cyclists for how light these guys are in the Tour de France, and how lean they are, their trunk is thick because they got to stabilize the hips. If they can't stabilize the hips, they don't transfer enough energy to the pedal. They're not going to be fast enough. So their waists aren't as small as you think they are. They're small guys, but their waist would be
Proportionately.
smaller if they, yeah, but proportionately, their waist is not tiny. Okay, for how small they are, and
Yeah, I
it's to
can't imagine you
stabilize the
could
hips.
ride that long maintaining a good position that,
Hmm.
you're braced, you have a neutral spine, you're not
Yeah.
going into constant flexion and extension on
Hmm.
a bike. I'm sure that wouldn't be great just purely efficiency wise, but the low back would start to
Yeah.
fatigue. It's probably already bad enough because you're in
Hmm.
this constant state with your hamstring flexing and pulling, and
Yeah.
so the low back is already toast.
Yep.
You just can't do it anymore.
And if you look at cyclists who are weak in output, their hips go up and down when they pedal.
Mm.
You want the hips to stay stable, and you want it to look like a sewing machine where just the legs are going back up and forth. But if the hips are going like this, you're losing energy throughout your body that's not transferring down into the pedal to create speed to go forward.
Do you see that on
So you
stationary
want to
bikes as
stabilize
well?
it. Yes.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
look for that.
What you'll find is you're not going to see it as easily. You have to wait till someone's really fatigued or they're pushing the pace really high, or if they turn a dampener up to where it's hard. You'll see that in cycling, definitely. But these guys are, you're not going to see at the top level in cycling, but you see someone who's um, newer. And when I say newer, they could be even competing at a low level, like category 4 or something like that. And, USCF or doing some local club rides. And you'll see they get fatigued and their hips are just going back and forth. And they're just dissipating energy. It's like anything else we talk about. I want to eliminate all excess movement in an athlete. All excess movement does is allow energy to go in different directions than where it's utilized, increase the chance of injury and lowers chance of reduplication.
So we
And that's
don't do
also
this when we get ready to deadlift.
definitely
Yeah, and then there's that
right,
last, like, you do a couple of these and then you set,
right.
yank the bar a little bit out of position and then go.
Yep, right.
Uh,
So
Seems
yeah, I
very.
love limiting all access movement. And it's funny because people think hardcore is like putting on a huge routine and showing everybody this like half dance routine that you're doing. But really what hardcore is eliminating everything you don't need because it's all about the lift and not about the look, what people think, anything else. And also, here's the thing. Some people aren't doing it to get people to look at them. Some people are doing it because they're trying to get in a position and maybe when they were newer to lifting, they did that and all of a sudden they had a good day lifting. So then they like stuck with it.
Uh-huh.
If you develop that habit and say you've been doing that for 10 years, it takes a lot of effort to eliminate it, right? And
Yeah.
that's hardcore. You want to talk about hardcore? Eliminate things that are comfortable for you because it does not transfer to output. That is hard for people to do.
I know you got to run, but
Mhm,
the special exercises that we use select those muscle groups so that people know how to engage them without
mhm,
putting on this big show
mhm.
and engaging and doing.
Yeah.
People know how to brace their trunk because our ab work is different and it
Mhm,
causes people to quickly brace their trunk. If you're
mhm,
doing, obliques against bands, you're quickly having to brace to make that change of direction, hold for a second, store some kinetic energy, back down and go again. And all those things, we teach people, through an arch to round back, making sure that they can maintain a position. Right. And it also
mhm,
strengthens up the spinal erectors, frees up, uh, the spine so that it can move independently and articulate because of that compression force that they might have,
mhm.
or, for the people on the cell phones, the crepitus.
Yeah.
But all those things matter. And, this program, and Shane's, seen a lot of people in the early days, do it wrong as the experiment. Well, necessarily wrong. It was the information that they had at
Mhm,
the time. People got hurt. They tweaked it. They fixed it. They optimized it because we didn't have, and in the U.S. we don't have a long line of lifters beating down the
mhm,
door, trying to feed their
mhm.
family. There's other jobs.
Yeah.
So, Bulgarian method and things like that. They can break lifters left and right, and
Mhm,
whoever's left standing is your Olympian that's going to go represent. So
mhm,
it is a different thought process and a different model. Like everything
mhm,
has been carefully selected and curated to prevent the things that you guys saw early on.
mhm,
Um, because it's really easy, like you always say, to keep a 100-pound squatter safe.
mhm.
But once you start pushing to the upper extremes of what people have never done before. When you're
Mhm.
trying to break world records or you're trying to become a champion of some sort, you are going to need something a little bit more
Mhm.
specialized to help you with that. But it works for the 100-pound squatter as well,
Mhm.
right? I couldn't imagine being under 1,000 pounds on my back and then not being confident that my trunk couldn't brace that.
Right.
It wouldn't happen.
That'd be a
Um,
bad
yeah,
feeling. Yeah, you wouldn't clear the
but
rack to begin
you
with,
don't
but
get the trunk that
mhm.
supports that. You don't get the spinal erectors that support that. You don't get the glutes, hamstrings, calves, quads,
Mhm.
everything that supports that without separating the parts
Mhm.
and then putting them back together for the whole, for the
Y
sum, right?
Yep. You know, when we were talking earlier about, constant variation and how you learn new movement to get better at movement and you learn new movement at a faster rate of speed. And I can say this to you because you experience this is that if you do a 1 rep max squat with 25% of combinator resistance on it, 25% band tension box squat for a max, it feels heavier than your straight weight max by a lot. What you find is you get very efficient at picking that weight out of the hooks real quick, getting locked on your bone structure, and starting that squat soon because it feels so heavy. It's such a stress on you. That just improved your movement quality when you go back to a straight weight. And when you pick a straight weight bar out, it feels light. It never feels as heavy as training does because it doesn't have a combinating resistance. So it's not as heavy at the top. And it always
Well,
feels easier and
and
better.
the reality too is like it light enough straight weight, not 800 pounds, of course, but at a light enough straight weight, you can get away with being slightly
Mhm.
disengaged, right? So if you have
Yep.
slight flexion or slight extension, you can get away with that and make those corrections because
Mhm.
it's not gonna punish you. You can't really do that with bands. If you
Yep.
begin to break a little bit, the
Mhm.
energy is going wherever you allow it to go. So you have to,
Mhm.
rotate the hips under, make sure that the midline's fully supporting that
Mhm.
load and that everything moves in as straight of a line as possible. And those bands will let you know real quick when you mess up.
Mhm.
And it's the funniest thing. When I have big dogs that come in and they think they know better, I don't even tell them. I just set it up
Mhm.
and I watch them come out of the rack and they go, "Whoa," like that. And
Mhm.
I'm like, "All right, yeah, that's just there's no weight on the bar. That's just the band. So now we're gonna learn
Mhm.
how to pick it,
Yeah, right.
right? Because I told you don't pick it up right. You mess the
Mhm.
lift up from your very start. The second you touch the bar, you did it wrong.
Yep.
So now that you understand that you did it wrong because you have an opposing force that's trying to pull
Mhm.
you straight down, now let's fix your setup, let's fix your technique, and let's
Mm.
make you as efficient as possible.
Yeah, funny how
Uh,
they're ready to listen then, right?
yeah, the
Mm.
deadlifts, you see that a lot on deadlifts too when you get them set up for deadlifts, and I'm
Mhm.
telling them like, "Hey, you're in your toes, you're in your toes." I need you to. I don't tell them they're in their toes, but in my mind, I'm thinking,
Mhm.
"Hey, you're in your toes. I need you to sit back a little bit into your heels so that we can keep your toes down, but sit back into your heels so we can use the hamstrings, glutes more."
Mhm.
And they're like, "I am." I'm like, "Okay." So I put them on the bands, and the first thing that happens because they're on their
Mhm.
toes, they get yanked forward, and then they're like, "Oh shit." It
Mhm.
is so quick to correct an
Mhm.
athlete when they get under. You can try to cue them, slow them down, put them under PVC pipe, and do all these things. Um, but you know how to use your hamstring. You know how to get somebody to use their
Mhm.
hamstrings really fast in a
Mhm.
deadlift. Put them underneath bands and see what happens. They're going to feel
Yeah.
their hamstrings like they've never felt on deadlifts before.
Yeah, and the thing is you need buy-in from an athlete. Doesn't matter if you know it. If they don't think what you're saying is correct, they're not gonna listen. You don't have buy-in, and that's where you see that, and all of a sudden, it's guaranteed buy-in. Buy-in to
Yeah,
smack you in the face, it'll let you
right.
know exactly what's going on. So,
100%, brother. Let's do it again next
cool.
week.
Alright, sounds good, man.
All
You
right.
have a good
Hopefully,
rest
I
of your
won't
day, and
screw this one up. But I've been able to hear you.
cool.
You've been able to hear me, and
Good.
magically, I think this one's going to work because we didn't have
Yep,
the wives touching the controls. We'll blame it on
there you
them.
go. We'll see. Take it easy, buddy.